You guys.
Or do we want to wait for Jenna?
I'd like to at least have two
Yeah.
counselors here before we start officially. So if we
Excuse me.
There we go. Thank you. I'll have the agenda in front of you. We're going to start with introductions. Gian first. Jenna on first.
Hi, everybody. Mayor Jenna Goodman Campbell.
Anthony Brodman, then City Council.
And then we're going to introduce the auditors. So Amanda. Okay.
Amanda McCleary-Moore, partner with Moss Adams.
And then
Hi,
Kevin.
everyone. Kevin Muller-Liley, Senior Manager with Moss Adams.
Great. So the bulk of the agenda is the auditor's presentation. So Amanda is going to get that first.
All right, and I'm going to kick it off. So thanks for having us here today. It's nice to come over to Bend. Going to actually stay here through Friday. So finished up my my government bid fund 22. So here's the agenda of what we plan to discuss today. So we'll briefly talk about our audit team, as well as the services that we provide to the city of Bend. We'll walk through some significant audit areas. We won't go into too much detail to tell you all the stuff that we did. We won't give away all of our secrets, but we'll go into some of those areas. And then, of course, the important pieces there are our audit reports and our opinions over the work that we did. And then because our audit standards say that our audit reports don't tell you enough information, there's some additional required communications to those charged with governance. So we'll go through that with you as well. And then we'll end with a small accounting update, but we won't take you through a whole accounting lesson. So here's your audit team. This is by no means everybody that works on the audit. Obviously, we have staff and seniors, but my responsibility as the partner on the audit is at the end of the audit, I sign the reports. So that means I have to make sure that we did everything that we're supposed to do under our audit standards before I can go ahead and sign those reports. So Kevin, who's on the call as well, helps me out a lot. He's a senior manager. He helps me with a lot of review and helping manage the team, some client communication. So he's a very important person for the audit for me. Keith Simovic is somebody that you don't know by name probably, other than maybe in these presentations. He's our concurring reviewer. So at Moss Adams, we think that it's important to have somebody that is not in the details of the day-to-day work of the audit. So kind of a cold reviewer, technical reviewer, really making sure that that there was nothing that was missed in the financial statements or audit reports. And so just does a very independent look of the financial statements. Harvey Wang is our audit manager. So he's kind of the point person for everybody. He's the point person for our team. He's the point person for your team. So he kind of gets into all the details of all the sections. Plus, he'll probably work on some of the more technical areas given his experience. And then Leela is our IT senior manager. So she presents a report over the ITGCs, your general controls over IT, and provides feedback on those important controls that you have within your IT systems. So here are the nature of the services that we provide to the city. So we audit the financial statements of the city and of your urban renewal agency under the generally accepted auditing standards, as well as the governmental auditing standards. We have to follow those additional standards because you receive just a little over $750,000 in federal awards, which requires us to have that single audit, which then requires us to follow those additional auditing standards, which is just a little bit higher level of independence that we have to maintain, as well as additional CPE, continuing education for us, to make sure that we understand those specific standards, as well as you get an additional audit report from us. Number 2 up there on the screen is because in addition to following all the accounting standards that you have to follow under the GASB accounting standards and putting together your financial report, you also apply for the GFOA certificate, which means that you include some additional information in there, your statistical section, the introductory section, which is not required by your accounting standards, but is required in order to obtain that award. So that is something that we review, is compliance with those additional standards as well. Actually, I'm a GFOA reviewer, so I review a few of those, volunteer for the GFOA each year as well. So because you're an Oregon municipality, we have to also follow the Oregon minimum audit standards in addition to the other auditing standards that we're already following, which requires that we audit compliance with some of the specific areas that Oregon wants us to. And those are, just for examples, would be budget law, your procurement policies, what you invest your investments in. So those are the type of areas that we look at under those audit standards, but it's more compliance driven in nature. one of the reasons you get an additional report out of that is they actually have similar language in there to the governmental auditing standards report over internal controls over financial reporting. And the reason why they want that report, I believe, is because if you were a smaller government that didn't have to follow the governmental auditing standards and you had some sort of deficiency in internal controls over financial reporting, they wouldn't write about it. And so that is one of the things that would be included in the government report as well as the Oregon report. And then lastly, because you do have those federal awards, we perform our audit under the uniform guidance as well. That requires that we not only test compliance, but look at internal controls over compliance. So here's like a snapshot of what our audit report looks like this year. The reason why I wanted to present it on the screen here is that in addition to you having to have a couple new accounting standards to implement this year, we had a new audit standard to implement this year, which really just changed the format and some of the content in our audit reports. So you can see the very first paragraph is our opinions. And so instead of being buried 4 or 5 paragraphs down, the audit board decided that it would be important to let this be the first thing that the readers look at. Now, there's a lot of other really good information in the audit report, but this is what the readers are going to want to know how you did. You can see up on the screen, we issued unmodified opinions, but we will go over the findings of all the reports here in a second, but we just wanted to mention that. And then you can see that last paragraph that we have on the slide there is the emphasis of matter paragraph. And this relates to the fact that you did have to implement a new accounting standard, GASB 87 on leases, which required a significant amount of work for your team, as well as significant changes to your financial statements. So I mentioned those required communications to those charged with governance. We actually have 2 responsibilities. One is there's some responsibilities in planning, addition to the responsibilities of discussing our audit conclusions at the end. So our timing, the items that we talk about in planning are typically timing. So our timing of our audit went according to plan. And then just a kind of a high level point here to make is that there was no audit adjustments necessary in order to issue our unmodified opinions. But I'm really giving away the good stuff here on 2 slides before we actually get to the conclusions. So before we do that, I'm going to walk through some of the significant audit areas that we look at as part of our audit, so you know a little bit about what we do. This is by no means everything that we do. These are probably the areas that you notice, given our requests, are the areas where we spend the significant amount of our time doing the audit. So the first one is over cash and investments. Not only is it a significant balance that we think is critical to audit, there are quite a few accounting disclosures that you need to comply with, as well as some Oregon statutes that you have to comply with as well. So we spend time looking at that. In addition, we confirm significant balances and make sure that they're reported correctly in the financial statements. This year, one of the main things that we noticed with a lot of our clients was related to investments and reporting that unrealized gain or loss correctly. And so your team did a good job of doing that. We definitely had some adjustments there for some of our other clients. Revenue and receivables. So these are clearly significant. Not only are they significant, but our audit standards tell us this is an area that you should focus on. And while there's not a lot of incentive in governments to really overstate your revenue, revenue is complicated because you have multiple bases of accounting that you have to follow. And so in order to get those right in each different one of your statements, it is an area that we spend time looking at cutoff. There are certain revenue accounts that we're able to confirm balances and determine whether or not they're materially correct. Capital assets, also a very significant asset on your books. What we do there is we look at a roll forward that you put together, and we typically test any significant assets as well as disposals to determine whether capital assets are materially correct. We also do take a look at the useful lives, making sure that they're consistent and materially correct there as well, based on your policies. So leases is a new one to add to the screen this year. So you had both leases as a C and a lessor. So quite a few transactions there to implement. And so some of the things that we looked at were your discount rates, making sure that the agreements. So we tested a sample of contracts to make sure that they were properly accounted for, especially when there's those additional terms to add on there. So looking at those and seeing if they were properly recorded. So as a focus for all of our clients this year was over leases and implementation of that standard. Long-term liabilities. So for any of your debt, we send confirmations, or we test current year payments if we confirmed or tested the debt in the past. In addition to debt, you also have some other long-term liabilities for your pension and OPEB balances. Of course, we look at how you allocate that to the functions, as well as making sure that your balances agree to the actuary reports that were presented to you. One of the things that's important for us is making sure that in order to determine that those reports are accurate, we're not actuaries, but so we rely on them as a specialist to tell us that those are correct. But what we test is to make sure that you're providing good data to the actuaries so that they can put together the best estimate that they can for you. So for financial close and reporting, I talked a little bit about your 200 plus page financial statement. And so we spend a lot of time looking at that financial statement and making sure that it is presented correctly and meeting those additional GFOA elements. Federal grants. So this is your single audit. So this year we tested 2 programs. To no one's surprise, we tested the ARPA award. And in addition to that, we tested the Clean Water State Revolving Fund Cluster, which it's just been a couple of years since that one was audited. So that had to be audited as well, in addition to the other award that would have actually probably provided enough coverage. But due to the length of time since that one, we audited that as well. You can see that there were no findings to report under the audit of those 2 awards. The last one is those Oregon minimum standards, the testing that we do over procurement and your budget. We did not identify any issues related to those as well. So I've hinted at this a lot throughout my presentation so far, but we issued unmodified or clean opinions over both the city financial statements as well as the Urban Renewal Agency. And while I'm sure that that's no surprise to anybody and it is expected, it's still worth mentioning that is a big deal to put together those financial statements, put them together timely, implement a new standard, get us the work we need in order to get that opinion. So nice job there. Over the Oregon minimum standard. So this is where I mentioned that if we identified some sort of control deficiency, we have to evaluate that and determine whether or not it's a significant deficiency or material weakness, which essentially just means that a material error could slip through the cracks. If we identified anything like that, it would be included in this report. You can see we did not include any control findings in our Oregon report, as well as no compliance findings. The last 2 reports is that government auditing standards report over internal controls over financial reporting. Mentioned this as well, no control findings that we would have included in the Oregon report. And there is an additional requirement for this report. If we identify an instance of non-compliance that impacts your financial statements, that would get included in this report as well. And we did not identify any compliance findings to include in that report. And then the last one is our audit, the uniform guidance. And we tested the 2 major programs. And as the conclusion of our testing, we had no control findings or any compliance. So overall, all clean reports is really how to present that. So like I said, while somewhat expected, I know for the city, it's still, implementing new controls and new policies and procedures over a substantial amount of federal funding that you've been given is still challenging. So So yeah, congratulations. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin, and he's going to walk through some of those additional items that we communicate as part of our audit.
Thanks, Amanda. Sorry, I can't make it there in person to join. Amanda would love to be in Bend, but wasn't going to work out. So yeah, I want to carry on with what Amanda said. Amazing job. I mean, that's information that lenders, bond rating agencies are really going to like to hear about, and that's good for city finance situation going forward for sure. And then also amongst a team change where they're shifting roles during the year. And despite that, right here on this slide, we issued our audit report on December 12th. I believe last year's audit report was issued on December 13th. So despite all the changes and transitions with your team, the audit was really similar. And on top of that, the big lease accounting standard was a heavy lift. And I'll reach out and give some praise to Tracy, because I know she jumped on that, I think maybe 2 years ago, to really dig into the leases. We do have some clients that cracked open the GASB Statement 87 on leases in the summer, and that was something that we had to really work with them to get their audit out. So it wasn't the case with the city. On the next slide, want to say that your accounting policies and procedures are disclosed in the financial statements. Those are consistent with prior years, the exception being the new lease accounting standard. There's a number of balances on there. There's receivables, there's payables, deferred inflows. So your accounting policies recognize that implementation of that standard and the new policies because of that. And Amanda touched on, you have different types of leases. So as far as assets that the city's leasing from others, those are pretty big dollars. And that's why we put an emphasis of matter in your audit report. Some of our clients were not doing that, but you can see here 41.7 million. And I believe that's mainly buildings with the fire department, but that is a big material number on your financial statements. And then on the other end of it, assets that the city has that they're leasing out to others, I believe in the neighborhood of about 20 million. That's primarily with your airport leases. It's kind of interesting with the standard. If you had FA regulated lease agreements, so let's say Amanda and I also audit City of Eugene, the city has that big airport. Those leases actually get scoped out, but because you're not quite that size of airport, you don't have those sort of regulated agreements, you actually have to put your leases on your financial statements. So more work in that situation. Want to let you know that there's a lot of estimates in the financial statements, kind of touched on that already. Things like the collectability of your receivables, how long your capital assets will be used, and then PERS, certainly with pension and some other OPEB, as well as the county, or excuse me, the city reaches out and you get your own actuary for your single employer implicit rate subsidy OPEB plan. That requires an actuary. So a lot of assumptions there. And then probably the newest one on here is with leases. It is a difficult accounting standard. So your team had to look and see when lease agreements were going to be extended. Would there be, is it likely an extension would happen? So maybe another 5 years. Those are judgment calls that have to be made, as well as what the lease discount rate is that's being used. Here's a list of the key financial statement disclosures. Excuse me, these kind of line up with the significant audit areas that Amanda talked about earlier. So I think if you wanted to dig into where some of those estimates are, what those big dollars are, these are the ones to look at in the financial statements. And yeah, very pleased to say no difficulties encountered during the audit. Management answered our questions in a timely manner, and that really helped us conduct our audit work this year. No audit adjustments. We hit on that, so that's what you want to hear. And we reach out to the city attorney to understand what sort of legal matters are out there. Should there be anything accrued as a liability in the financial statements? And if so, is it already in there? There wasn't really anything that needed to be highlighted in your financial statements. So we thought that the disclosure in there about, you have some legal matters that city attorney is handling was an adequate disclosure for your financial statement users. No disagreements with management. We talked about no internal control findings or non-compliance. And then we request management signs a representation letter at the end of the engagements, kind of saying all the key things that we heard them say during the audit are indeed true, and we didn't have any problem getting that letter before issuing our reports. And as far as we understand, city didn't reach out and consult with any other accountants about any accounting or auditing matters. Had they, we would have let you know about that. And Amanda talked about our IT team. They did provide a memo at the end of November. And I think we've been doing your audit for several years now. There used to be several recommendations, and that memo is down to one recommendation. I'll give a quick summary on it. It talked about having periodic security access reviews of two systems, one being Kronos and the other being SunGuard. Now, SunGuard is going away on a go-forward basis, so really that's not a recommendation to continue. And then with Kronos, there was a significant event for other Kronos, users, not just the city, and it was down for several months, and because of that, that really limited the city's ability to do those sort of checks, and that's something to work on over the coming year. But that's really the most significant recommendation I wanted to let you know about. And then certainly no fraud or non-compliance that government auditing standards require us to report. So that is what you want to hear. So those are my prepared remarks on the required communications. And then I think Amanda's going to wrap it up with counting update.
All right, I think I just have one slide here. And like I said, I'm not going to go into an accounting lesson here. Your team is very educated in understanding the new GASB standards that come out, but we just wanted to highlight kind of as a reminder of what the upcoming standards are. So this first one is on conduit obligations. So there's some additional requirements. And then if there are certain circumstances that it is more clear on when you might need to report a liability if you have any conduit. So it clarifies, obviously always the intent to make statements more comparable. These next two kind of follow the lease accounting standard. So their implementation is going to be a bit similar. Actually, that GASB 96, so subscription-based IT arrangements, actually some governments implemented that along with GASB 87. But then there also is GASB 94, which if you have any public-private or public arrangements, then you would need to consider those as well. So there's always some clarifying standard that comes out every couple of years. So we have omnibus number 20 for 2022. So it's important to look in there. There are obviously a lot of just clarifying items, terms changing from methodology in some situations. And so it's important to look at that. It's pretty short, but making sure that it has different year ends for when, if some of those items might be applicable. So just a reminder there. GASB statement number 100 is providing some guidance on accounting changes and error corrections for consistency. There are a number of GASB standards that don't explain how to implement and whether you might restate your opening fund balance or opening net position. So it provides some guidance on for some consistency when implementing some certain standards. And then some additional clarifying information on compensated absences. There's definitely some differences on how governments report their compensated absences on their books. So this clarifies some of those items for a bit more consistency. So as always. So those are what's new on the horizon. With that, we just want to say thank you to your team for making it so that we could get this audit done on time and not extend. I have a number of extensions this year. My January is going to be quite busy. So.
Well, and I want to recognize before staff leaves, really want to recognize the team and Tracy. So this is Tracy's last year in the finance department. Starting January 1, she's coming over to take on the internal auditor role. So we're excited for that. And then you all know Jeanette. This is Jen Elkin. She's our accounting and financial reporting manager, and Kimberly Lutz, who is financial accountant extraordinaire.
Yeah, I would pile on as well. Just Kimberly in particular and Tracy, lots of hours, lots of effort. If you guys have seen the ACFR, it's several inches thick. And there's lots of blood, sweat, and tears in there. You just can't see it, but it's these two in particular who really drive that process and put in all the extra hours to get it out and get it out on time. And you can hear from the auditors it was appreciated, and certainly by Sharon and Jen and myself in particular.
I'll just say it's nice to see that memo of kind of more the, yes, we've got a clean opinion for quite some time now, but there's also other things that we can be doing that you point out, and that's shrinking, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just to have the one that's noted with Kronos, which was a nationwide issue that we were dealing with. I think there's all of us have lessons to learn from that experience. So thank you to the team for that result. It's great. Yeah. It's
I think that we're doing this year's audit, which for me is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice to have it done for the holidays.
Last part of this staff to leave and
And so the meeting will continue to be live streamed and recorded. Melissa will stay in and then we'll leave, and then you guys can close the meeting out. We don't need to come.
Okay, is it possible to ask one something before sharing this, just because I sure want to make sure that I'm saying. The court fines issue, which I know was not part of the audit, wasn't significant enough to trigger aspects of the audit.
Correct.
Right.
How do you describe if we're asked, how would you describe?
So that means when we consider fraud, so your team identified it and then also hired somebody to look into it more and found out that with respect to the financial statements, it was immaterial. I realized that no theft is considered, immaterial to the city, and you should investigate those things when they occur. But because it was not material fraud, but we did do some additional procedures over kind of cash handling and those types of things. So what it does is as part of our audit, we look at internal controls, and one of our things that we have to do is do interviews about susceptibility of fraud. And what we do is we use that information to design our audit approach. So because of the information we know, it tweaked our audit approach, but it's not something, because it wasn't material, it's not something that's going to show up as in your findings or anything. It's not going to impact our opinion. It's not something that we needed to disclose in the notes, anything like that.
And then I was just going to add it wasn't involved in a grant or something like that either, where something small, we probably would need to report that. So that was a little different
I
too.
just appreciate, I think it shows even immaterial issues were treated very seriously. And I was encouraged to see how we handled that immaterial, but smaller. So
We did not treat it as
No.
material.
Yeah.
All parties were.
We hired, yes, they were prosecuted. We also hired not just one, but we had two outside looks at it to make sure that we weren't missing anything. A lot of internal eyes, checking and making sure that we were restored.
And with it being immaterial to the financial statements, one thing I want to point out, given the work that you did on that, it speaks to the tone at the top, right? That you're not going to allow those things to be swept under the rug, that you will take it very seriously. That is something that we consider when we accept clients, when we work with our clients, and we reassess, continuance each year. And that is very important. I would say not all companies do that when the dollar amounts are not very large, and then that person's just going to go do it somewhere else. So,
thank you. That's all. I just wanted to make sure I was using the terminology correctly.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
yeah, of course. Thanks, Kevin.
No,
I'm going to stay here till Friday. Yeah, I'm going to be here till Friday.
And you'll be here during the.
I have the city presentation, and then I actually get to stay here until 7.
Okay. So most of you just let her in back in here. And I will remind you guys one more time that we are still being live streamed and recorded.
Jen, I'll let you kick it off.
Okay, great. I think this is just our time to ask any questions we might have of the auditor, and I don't have any. So Councilor Broadman, do you? And I'm eager to leave my house and come in for the council meeting in a few minutes. So Councilor Broadman, how about you?
I'll be quick. I mean, is there anything sitting in our positions that you would want to know if you were us? Besides, this is a glowing, I think we'll work hard.
Yeah, gosh, nothing that I can think of off the top of my head. Like I said, I think it's impressive that that the one incident that occurred was dealt with, and they let us know about it.
Mhm.
So, I mean, that really kind of speaks to that tone at the top of management on, those types of things, which is encouraging for us, to know that while it was an unfortunate event that happened to the city, you took the right measures. And so aside from that, which I think is a positive that your team handled it correctly. I can't think of anything else. Kevin, anything that you can think of specifically? Did we lose Kevin?
It looks like it. I guess my other question was, and we have Councilor Sirleaf here too. My last question is probably, was there anything else that was deemed material that either gave you comfort or didn't give you comfort, and it was deemed to be immaterial, and so it doesn't appear in the audit that you can remember?
Thing that I can think of off the top of my head, I think when we review the financial statements, we always provide feedback. So there's that. But nothing that gives me a lot of concern. It's 200 pages. You gotta tick and tie all of that, it's just a lot. So we do provide feedback, but nothing that I can think of specifically that gives me concern. And that's obviously in just putting the package together, right? So that's putting it into the nice 200 pages that you can see. We spend a lot of time also in the details of the underlying information that goes into that financial statement and testing there. And nothing that I can think of off the top of my head there either. And there actually is a threshold of when we would actually provide feedback on past adjustments, is what they're called. Right. Essentially, that there was an adjustment, it was not material, management passed on it, but it's at a threshold that we need to communicate it. So we didn't have any of those. Okay. And then the other one is if we identified a an error that had to be corrected in order to obtain your unmodified opinion. That's also something that they would have to record, obviously, and then we would provide that information with this meeting.
Great.
So I would say those are probably the two things that we don't have. So below those thresholds, there could have been things that I'm just not thinking of, but nothing comes to mind.
Great, it's substantial.
Mhm.
Jenna, you want to adjourn so you can get here?
All right, I'll move to adjourn the audit committee. Thank you.
Thank
See you
you.
in a moment,
Thanks so
Amanda.
much.
Okay.